Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Morning. It is good to see everyone here, and thank you to anyone that is tuning in from all over the world. Debbie, if you're listening, please let us know. Anyone else who is joining us, we'd love to at least see your name in the chat box. Feel free to ask questions. We are on page 226, and we didn't do the blessings yet on the study of Torah, so let's do those together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al divrei Torah. And now a blessing on the food. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. 226. So today's class is about a deep idea. It's one that's hard to articulate in words because it's very deep. It's very central. Every now and then there are certain paradigms through which we view life, and everyone views lives out of certain a pair of glasses, a paradigm, a perspective. And there's some Jewish perspectives that are very different than the way Western thought often looks at it. One that we mentioned last week when we spoke about rights versus responsibilities, how Torah is very much responsibility-based as opposed to rights-based. We're going to do another deep one this week. It's hard to articulate, but I hope when we leave, we'll have a clear enough idea of what it is. It's often that I meet someone who will say, "Oh, I'm not the religious type, but I'm very spiritual." What does that mean? What is someone suggesting when they say that? I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. What does that mean? I hear it all the time. Rabbi, I'm very spiritual, not religious.
Maybe they don't practice the traditions and the rituals and that type of thing, but in their heart, they think a certain way.
Okay, so I feel a spiritual connection to God,
Right.
But when it comes to rituals, traditions, practices, that ain't for me. I don't do that. Hal, what are you gonna suggest?
Well, if you have enough word, you can talk to Tina.
So you should know. So expound on that for a moment.
My wife
Thank you.
really never goes to temple except the high holy days. She likes yahrzeit candles, and she's twice been named the top Jewish artist in the state, and she does what is considered very spiritual ritual paintings, and I have no idea where it comes from.
Well, it's actually interesting. Sometimes people that are naturally very spiritual actually have a very hard time with religious practices. Why? And I find this, I have relatives like that as well. Why?
It doesn't speak to you as well as your own soul does.
Okay, yeah, they want to be able to not be bound by what they call organized religion, specific traditions, specific rituals. I want to do it in a way that is real for me. I hear this all the time. I was just saying, Brian, you ever heard, I'm spiritual, but I'm not very, and people say that. They don't want to be bogged down by details of religion, or they find it far more meaningful and inspirational when it is a natural flow from themselves. So first of all, it's beautiful that anyone feels a close relationship with God. I don't want to dismiss that feeling. Sometimes there are people that have that feeling that I wish I felt that very same bond and real relationship with God. But sometimes I feel that there can be something missing, that they don't realize what Yiddishkeit, what Torah, what Judaism has to offer on top of the spiritual connection that they are already feeling. Yes.
Is there a flip side to this as well, in the sense that there are people that go through the motions, but in their heart, they don't really, after they get done doing the ritual, Monday's back to normal and they're not very spiritual.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and once again, Rivka. Okay, that's fine. So, we need to obviously marry both ideas together. That the practices that we do should be filled with meaning and spirituality. But we're going to focus, and we've had many classes about that, we're going to focus mainly on the opposite. Why it is that many people are bothered by specific rituals, and the Torah perspective on that. Why it's not enough to be spiritual. Okay. So we're going to talk about a very ritual service that happened thousands of years ago. It happened in the temple. It's in the Torah portions that we are reading about these days. They're difficult portions because they're all about the sacrifices, the offerings, the various stuff that the priest would do in the ancient temple. And the beginning of last week's Torah portion, we're doing last week's class today, begins as follows, 2:26. And why don't you begin?
And God spoke to Moses, saying, Command Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the law of the burnt offering. That is the burnt offering which burns on the altar all night until morning, and the fire of the altar shall burn with it. And the Kohen shall don his linen tunic, and he shall don his linen trousers on his flesh. And he shall lift up the ashes into which the fire has consumed the burnt offering upon the altar, and put them down next to the altar. He shall then take off his garments and put on other garments, and he shall take out the ashes to a clean place outside the camp.
Let me explain. So every morning there was a certain ritual that had to happen in the temple. There was an altar in the temple. There were animal sacrifices brought, offerings brought on that. Okay? Usually there was one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and the one in the afternoon remained burning on the altar all night. And other offerings also, the ritual part was done during the day, but it remained burning all night. What are you left with?
Smell.
Ashes, smell. Okay. So there was a certain job that had to take place every morning. I discussed it briefly on Shabbat, but this will be a different place we're going with this. There was a job every morning that a Kohen had to come and take care of those ashes. And not very fun job, not very clean job. So there actually were two different things that the Kohen had to do. At the beginning, it says they should lift up the ashes, and there was a particular ritual they would do. They would take a spoonful of ashes, and they would they would place it right next to the altar. And then they would take all the other ashes, and what would they do with it? Take it outside the camp. Basically, janitorial duties every morning. Who would do it? The Kohen would do it. So there were two different jobs. One was more of a service with the ashes, and one was taking all the other ashes and bring them outside. Now notice, before the Kohen brought all the ashes outside, what does the verse instruct them to do? Change your garments. Why? Because if you ever touched a lot of ashes, it's dirty work, especially if they're wearing these white linen clothes. I can imagine the way the white clothes looked afterwards. And they would bring it outside the camp. So Rashi explains, the commentary Rashi, let's do text 3 now, explains what is the reason for the changing of the garments, Brian?
He shall then take off his garments. This is not an obligation, but a proper practice, that by taking out the ashes, he should not soil the garments in which he constantly officiates. By analogy, the clothes worn by a servant while cooking a pot of food for his master, he should not wear when he mixes a glass of wine for his master. Hence, the verse continues, and put on other garments inferior to those garments of the kahuna.
Kahuna means priesthood.
He had been wearing until now.
Okay, so there is what the garments that the servant wears while he is cooking, and there's the one while he is pouring a glass of wine. It says they shouldn't be the same. Similarly here, there was one that was done by the altar. It still had to do with the ashes, but it was a ritual by the altar. Wear your regular Kohen garments. The one you're doing as a janitor, put on other garments. Okay. What was odd, though, is that every single day, the same Kohen did both. There were enough Kohanim out there, priests, to get two different people to do the jobs. And it would have been far more efficient to do it that way. So the one person doesn't have to do the ritual and then run and change clothes and then come back and then take out the things and then change clothes again. Why not just have a person who is designated on a particular day to do the janitorial services?
Because one day there's gonna be somebody like you stuck out somewhere all by himself
Who what?
and needs to know how to do this.
Oh, how to take out. They had to get
Do the
used
whole
to.
thing.
So how designated people do it, but it's meaning Rashi here says the servant who does A shouldn't wear the same thing as the one who does B. But why shouldn't there be different servants? One is the cook and one is the janitor. Here it was that the Kohen had to do both. The person who was given the more prestigious position of the ritual with the ashes also had to be the individual doing it. And what is interesting is, and I'll take comments in a moment, is text 4 says that the janitorial job actually at the beginning wasn't even specifically given out. It was sort of anyone that wanted to do it would do it. Barbara, read text 4. This is a little history.
Originally, anyone who wished to remove the ashes from the altar did so. If there were many, they would run around the ramp of the altar, and whoever was the first to come within 4 cubits obtained the privilege. It once happened that 2 were even as they ran to mount the ramp. One of them pushed his fellow, who fell and broke his leg. When the court saw that they incurred danger, they ordained that the altar be cleaned only through a lottery to select the priest to perform the service.
Now, this is an odd kind of picture to imagine a bunch of Kohanim in this solemn temple all running up. There was no stairs. There was a ramp, and in their excitement, one pushes the other one off, and they said, the enthusiasm is nice, but we can't have this going on over here. They were sued. No. Workplace injury. In any event, it's very odd that not only was this something done, but people were running to do it. So just stopping here right now, what are your thoughts on why it was important? The very same Kohen, not a janitor, not someone else, take part in this ritual.
It's, it seems to me that the janitorial person should be given a certain amount of respect. I mean, it shouldn't be as menial as it would seem to be.
So this is a beautiful lesson in general about how to appreciate people doing janitorial services. All right, that's good. That's good. It places them higher, and that's something that we can take from up until today, when that the priests were the one doing it, and the same thing is true here. Yeah.
If the priesthood is separate from the material world,
Okay.
and doesn't get involved in the material world,
I like that.
they are not doing their job of bringing the spiritual world down to earth.
Good. So they couldn't just be lost in the heavens, but the heavens leave ashes over here, so they have to partake. That would be more of a Kabbalistic spin on it. They have to also deal with the remnants, the physicality of it. Practically, though, the simplest lesson I would say for the Kohen is what? Humility, right? Humility. We know of individuals or people. I'll put it this way. Whenever someone does a specific job, even if it's an important job and a very job that takes a lot of commitment, there's always a question we can have. At the end of the day, is it about themselves? Or is it about service? Someone was explaining to me that years ago, I didn't even know this. I never knew that there were no politicians for life. I didn't realize that there were term limits. I mean, people came and for a period of time, and they usually were trying to run their regular job at the same time. And Congress would come to Washington how often? Originally. Anyone familiar with this?
once a year.
Whatever it was, they did their work, and then they were very much connected to the regular world, and they gave up of their time. I guess similar maybe to the way city council is today, in some places, where you manage your regular job, but together with it, as giving of yourself, of service to others, you sacrificed your own time, your own whatever, for the sake of the country. But there was never supposed to be, you stayed in office forever. I didn't know that. Senator to Congress, today you can be senator for Congress, but I didn't read, and it's actually a very neat idea, because then it actually is, you're not worried about your reelection, right? The point here is not a political conversation, but that would be a good litmus test to know that it's not about making yourself bigger, it's about making yourself smaller. It's about service. It's about giving of yourself, as opposed to, hey, this is a great way to make myself, to get out there. And so the same can be true in any noble pursuit that we do. Rabbi, yes, Brian.
Side issue, your microphone's not plugged in.
Thank you.
I'm glad I came.
Thank you. Amnon?
Yes.
Okay, it wasn't plugged in, but there wasn't much discussion around the room, so it's
Yeah,
probably
I know.
okay.
I've been raising it and lowering the.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Sorry about that. No matter what you do, a rabbi, right? Public servant. Well, or it can be, it's a great way to speak and to talk and to get yourself out there. How does one know? What is the litmus test? How do we know when we are doing a particular endeavor, whether it's about you or it's about service? Or you might say it's not important. Is it important? Is it important that it's not about making you bigger? It's about the cause.
I would think generally it's important. It gets complicated when you get on a really large stage, like on the national stage. You have to make yourself bigger in order to be successful.
Yeah.
And so that's where it gets trickier.
Right. And especially the way the system is today. I mean, the only way to become, if you talk about a president, I mean, you have to be talking about yourself and make yourself really, really big. So that would be that.
But it's
that's not always so good.
Is the purpose even doing that? The I-ness, or that you were doing it for, as opposed to doing it for?
Yeah, well, the patriot says that he or she is doing it in order to have a larger influence to to better the.
And certainly in biblical stories, leaders always didn't want the job, and they were called and they resisted at the beginning. And so that is true when it comes to leadership. Here we're going to talk about relationships with others, and most specifically relationships with God. Okay, even in our relationships with God, all right. A lot of times we all use this word, meaningful, inspirational, uplifting, okay? These are important words. However, at the end of the day, Judaism will say, what is the purpose of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism, of Torah? Pam, what is it?
To serve God.
Okay, yeah. Ultimately, it's to serve God. It is how can I fulfill my mission best in the world? How can I serve God best in the world? How can I do what is needed of me the best in the world? Now, of course that should be inspirational. Of course that should be meaningful. But if it is about a meaningful experience, put it this way, if you poll an average person, I wouldn't be surprised if you ask them what is the purpose of religion. They might say to have, spiritual experiences and to spiritual experiences.
Do good.
Okay, do good. Be part of something. Judaism will say it's about service to God. And as such, in the temple, a place where there were Kohanim doing their work, it was awfully important for them to always have the reminders that ultimately this is about service of God. And you know what? One of the ways you serve God here is by doing what?
Take out the trash.
Take out the trash. It might be that the president doesn't usually take out the trash in the White House, right? There are other people. But there was something very important about the Kohen taking out the trash. Because it was never about you in the first place, and it's about what's meaningful to God. And guess what? In the Torah it says, this is one of your ways you serve God. And guess what? Is there really a difference between something that feels, seems, appears very inspiring versus something that seems very lowly if God said do both of them? So let's go a little bit. Yes. Yeah, some questions. All right. I went on long enough. Pam, then Brian.
What's the litmus test? You said there's
The litmus test
is it important? You said what's the yeah.
Oh, all right. So I guess the first I asked, is it important? The litmus test would be how willing are we able? How willing are we to do those things that aren't very meaningful to us to get the job done? How willing are we to do those things where we are not even in the limelight? We are not even in the center stage to get the job done. If it is about the cause, Pam, if it is about the cause, it makes no difference what is needed of me to get that job done. And if it is about the cause, it's not even important that is it that it should be done, or is it that I should be the one getting it done? So these are subtle ideas, but we're going to develop this theme further as the class goes on. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, so I object a little bit.
Good. We want that.
when saying that this particular commandment, which is important,
correct,
it's direct, it's clear on what to do, is, I think you're suggesting, is really equal to other commandments. And this one is more, it needs to be done. Whereas things like teach these words to your children are pretty important. So, this is, we have housekeeping to do it.
Right. But would you agree that a Kohen who would not do this, it would be reflective on the fact that he's missing something basic?
Sure. I get that. I just don't accept the equality of all mitzvot.
Yeah, okay. But we don't. But I also believe that sometimes we don't know which mitzvah. But you are correct. Even over here. Okay, let's go further. But I hear what you said. Let's do text 5. And the Rebbe here talks about a mitzvah. And one of the problems we have when we talk about spirituality, all of us, is that we imagine in our minds, everybody, you know what, I'm trying to get close to God. So I'm like a physical person over here, and God is like really, really spiritual. So like the more I strip myself of like physicality, that must be the closer I am to God. What is the problem with that model? The same way God is not physical, God is not spiritual. I'll say that again. The same way God is not physical, God has no descriptions. Okay. It's infinite. Is 100 any closer to infinity than 5? Okay. So the notion that if I want to get really, really close to God, if I went to the Himalayas and I were to live a life where I really, abstained from a lot of physical pleasures and spent my day meditating, I couldn't do that. But if I did that, I would be really close to God. That is the way I would typically think. Torah will argue and say, at the end of the day, there's a gulf that divides finite people from infinite God. And there's only one way to bridge that gulf, and that is?
Bring the holiness down.
On whose terms? God's terms. Meaning what's in the Torah. Because at the end of the day, there is an infinite gulf. It is only when Hashem says, you know what? This mitzvah is very important to me. That is what gives it its worth. That is what creates the connection. The connection can't only be made on my terms. It has to be made on Hashem's terms. So a funny thing happens. in a few weeks we're celebrating Passover, and if one person says, you know what, this Passover freedom thing is really meaningful to me, I want to sit and meditate on the significance of freedom in my life. So, scrap the matzah thing. The matzah thing, that was good when I was in Hebrew school, the matzah thing. But I want to just really just absorb, what does freedom mean in my life, and spiritually connect to freedom. That's nice, but guess what? God said in the Torah to eat matzah. Now, the matzah should also be meaningful, going back to what you said a moment ago. If you just do the physical deeds without any of the meaning, that also is not good. But to create our own way of connecting to God that makes us spiritual, it does. But spiritual is not always synonymous with holy. Holy, Torah will say, means a relationship with God. And a relationship with God happens on God's terms, more so than on our terms. And as such, the Rebbe here gives a metaphor of, text 5. Let's do the Rebbe's metaphor, text 5. Okay?
Mitzvah is an idiom of tzvata.
It comes from the word safta, which means to join or to attach.
Joining, attachment. Whoever performs a mitzvah becomes joined to the essence of God. May he be blessed. Who issues that particular command? The above can be understood through an analogy from the physical world. An extremely simple person has an inner sense of bitul, nullity, before the wisdom and greatness of a scholar, a bitul in which he senses himself to be an utter non-entity. The sage in turn does not sense or perceive the simpleton as belonging to at all to the category of human.
I want to explain. The Rebbe doesn't mean they're subhuman. That's not what the Rebbe is saying here. But a person who is an intellectual that lives in their mind, their entire world is, think of a real intellectual. Their whole world is philosophy. So if there is someone that they have absolutely nothing in common with, it's sort of like there's no connection. They're a person and I'm a person, but the world that I live in is a different world than this other person. Yeah, not that.
So the sage in turn does not sense or perceive the simpleton as belonging at all to the category of human beings. Not that the scholar dismisses or rejects him, God forbid, for that would be an evil trait. He simply sees no connection or relationship with him whatsoever. Now, when the sage instructs the simple man to do something for him, that command brings the simpleton into being. In his own self-perception, he's no longer a non-entity, but a somebody. He has assumed the status unto himself in that he is able to carry out an order of the sage, and it is him that the sage addressed and instructed.
Wow, they asked me to do something for them? Wow, that's amazing. So now all of a sudden, where you are now fulfilling the will of the other person, then you now have created this bond and a connection with someone that you otherwise would think you have never anything in common with. Yeah.
In the eyes of the sage, too, the simpleton now exists. He is a somebody to whom he, the sage, can speak and instruct. That is more, the command actually unites the lofty, exalted sage with the gross simpleton. The analog is obvious. It is understood that in the above analogy there is no difference at all what the command is about, whether a great lofty matter or a simple trivial one.
So in terms of creating a relationship, it makes no difference whether it's bring me a cup of tea or I would like you. The fact is a connection is made by you doing something. And the same thing is true with God. God says, you know what? It's really, really meaningful for you to light Shabbat candles for me, on the eve of Shabbat.
So
you do that, the connection was made. You now did something that God asks you to do. It's really meaningful to say the Shema. It would be really important that the night of Passover to eat matzah. So from this perspective, every mitzvah in the Torah, now, from this perspective, every mitzvah in the Torah shares something in common, and that is, it is what God asked us to do.
Yeah.
And if God asked me to chop wood all day, and if that was in the Torah, well, then that would create the connection. That's not what it is, but had that been there, that would create the connection. Now, am I suggesting that there is no difference between mitzvot? Am I suggesting that mitzvot don't have a value outside of this? No, that's not true.
But why
A
should
mitzvah, let me finish the train of thought.
Okay.
A mitzvah has two dimensions. One component of a mitzvah is its essential connection with God. The second component of a mitzvah is its utilitarian benefit in the world, the physical world, to other people, to the spiritual worlds. And in the second area, every mitzvah is different, distinct. So there's a bunch of mitzvot in the Torah. There's in category one, every mitzvah is the same. Every mitzvah is a connection to God. And that is why there's a concept in Torah. If one is involved in a mitzvah, they are exempt from a second. It's interesting. There's a category while you're involved in mitzvah A, you are exempt from a second. There are exceptions, such as no one else can do mitzvah B and someone is in need of it right now. But generally speaking, if a person is involved in mitzvah A, you're exempt from mitzvah B. Why? I'm plugged in right now. See? I'm plugged in. I don't need to do the other thing. Then there's a category B, which we generally focus on.
Can you give an example of that? I'm missing the connection there.
Especially if it has a time-based
Correct.
mitzvah with it.
Correct. An example of that would be that if right now we're studying Torah, we're doing a mitzvah. Now, if my wife asks me right now, I need the keys. That would come first, right? Right now we're here studying Torah. And right now we're plugged into Hashem because we're involved in the divine act of studying Torah. And if there was another good deed that needed to be done right now, it's not like we are busy doing this, so that we're not busy doing this. We're connecting to God. We don't need to be doing the other thing right now. We don't need to be doing the other thing right now. Now, there are some exceptions in Torah where there's no one else to be doing the other deed right now. But generally speaking, if there's a nice mitzvah, a nice good deed to be done right now, it's not just that we're busy doing this. We don't have to. We're not supposed to. We are already plugged in. There's no need to disconnect to plug into something else. That would be what that would mean. And it's true of many mitzvot. And sometimes we have what's called FOMO, fear of missing out. You're involved in one thing and you want to run, oh, there's something else going on. No, right now you're plugged in. There's nothing else that's even existing. So the Rebbe writes in text 6, this is not the Rebbe actually, this is the first Chabad Rebbe. He writes that there are two aspects of a mitzvah, an important text. Where are we up to in the reading? Yeah.
For in mitzvah there are two aspects. The first is mitzvah itself.
Text 6.
Yeah.
Through its observance, a flow of supernal energy and an unification is affected by the etrog of the shofar.
He gives an example, the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, that is the mitzvah of the day. The very fact that you blow the shofar, listen to the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, that is the mitzvah. Okay.
This cannot be considered a totally differential act of divine service, since there is a reason for it. In this sense, it works mechanistically, like a medical cure or a remedy.
Okay.
However, the second aspect is called King's command, and it is without reason. Even if it had no such supernal effect, it nevertheless is to be fulfilled as thought we had been commanded to chop trees by way of example.
So the first component of a mitzvah is what's specific to it. So let's say shofar, for example. What does shofar do? What does it do? It reminds us it wakes us up from our spiritual slumber. It reminds us of returning to God. It's an alarm clock. In Kabbalah, it discusses how Rosh Hashanah, there's a new flow of energy that comes down to the world, and the shofar helps elicit that. There are a lot of things we can say shofar does physically, practically, spiritually that are unique to shofar. And certainly when it comes to tzedakah, let's take an example that we understand better. Tzedakah, we give charity. We understand how the poor person is helped, or we understand how the organization is helped. We understand how I become a more giving person. We understand how the world is now elevated to a holier place. And those components are unique to tzedakah. But in addition to that, there's also the second component. This is what Hashem told us to do. And even if it didn't have component A, it would still be meaningful. And therefore, 233 says, when the next text, I'm going to give a metaphor here. Take a pause from the text because of time for a moment. When one only looks at the utilitarian component of the mitzvot, right? Then what tends to happen is we dismiss ones that we don't find meaning to, especially if today I don't find meaning to it. So it's going to be like a roller coaster. Today this is meaningful, tomorrow it's not. And we're human beings and we all have different feelings. It's natural that happens. It's natural that some days we'll be more interested in certain mitzvot than other days. But if we understand there's also the second component to the mitzvah, and that is what?
Connection to God.
God. I'm interested today. I'm not interested today. That's okay. That second component is happening even if I don't realize the first component. And in a sense, I could argue it's specifically on the days that I'm not interested in it that what? It's more meaningful. Why? Because it truly is about God, not about me. So we can understand full well now, going back to the Kohen and the cleanup duty. So you're right, Brian, that when it comes to the utilitarian benefit of the cleanup duty, that ranks much lower than some of the more profound mitzvot in the Torah. But the notion of this is what's needed of me, that is the same. And if a Kohen were to fail to do that, or fail to get that idea, they're missing out on something so important. That every mitzvah is a divine command. And I think this is true as a parent. Here's a good example of love a parent has to a child. There are some times where we want to do things for our children, right? Where it's because I want to feel like a good parent afterwards. I'm not saying something is wrong with that, but think about the parent that wants to take the kid to a certain outing in order that afterwards they can take pictures and put them on Facebook and everyone thinks they're amazing parents. And guess what? The kid didn't even want to do that. They wanted to go to the park. Now that's an extreme metaphor where it wasn't about the other person, it was about the parent.
Yourself.
We see in marriages we can have that, and it's specifically those times when we give in a way that is meaningful to the other person, even when I don't get it, that real love is expressed in a marriage, in children. Sometimes you want to reward the kids, so you take them take them to the store, and you can get something. And then they want to get something that, like, you really didn't want them to get. Not because it's bad, but, like, that wasn't your idea of excitement. And then I have to tell myself, Yisroel, it was never about you. Why are you doing this? To reward the kid for whatever it was. They can choose what they want, as long as, again, it's appropriate and whatnot. It was never about you. Why are you trying to impose what you think is let them be? What? Yes, I see some nods.
Yeah.
So it's that way with kids. It's that way with parents.
Everything.
It's that way with God as well. There's a beautiful Hasidic story that I love along these lines. And that is, there were two Hasidic Rebbes. His name was Reb Zusha. Some of you might have heard of him before. He was famous. Reb Zusha and his brother, Reb Elimelech. And they were traveling to a town, and they were wrongly imprisoned in this town. They accused them of being spies when they really were not. And they were thrown in jail. And while they were in jail, they were put in this dirty, dark room. You know the story, Pam?
I know it. Go ahead.
They were put in this room, and then one of them realized it was the time of the day that they had to pray. They prayed every single day, religious Jews. It was a time of day they had to pray. And one of them said, all right, Zusha, we got to go pray now. And then he goes, oh, we can't. Why not? Because it was a room that had this very smelly room that had a big bucket in the middle where everybody, did their things. And there's actually laws in Judaism that you're not supposed to pray in an area that's smelly. You can talk to God from the heart. All those things are fine. But the Amidah and the Shema, there are laws in Judaism you're not supposed to say when it's So then one of them starts to cry, "Oh, I can't pray. How could it be I can't pray?" He was so upset by the fact that he couldn't pray. And his brother turns to him and says, "You know what? The same God that generally wants us to pray is the same God that gave us in the Torah and said that you're not supposed to pray in this situation. So by not praying right now, you are serving God." So then he's like, "You know what? You got a good point." And they started, as the old Hasidim, they started singing. Just thinking about that idea, they started singing and dancing together. So then some of the other prisoners, like, what are these guys are nuts. So then the guard walks in and says, "Why are these guys dancing? You shouldn't be happy in jail. Why are they dancing?" It's like, "I don't have the foggiest idea, but it has something to do with that bucket over there." So the guy says, "I'll show them," and he took out the bucket, and then they davened. And that was the story. And for me, it was always a meaningful story because it was never about the experience that we want to have. It's what is needed of me right now. A teacher once gave another beautiful metaphor. Well, let's do text 9 before we do that. And this is from the third Chabad Rebbe, and he writes this on his introduction to the Zohar. It's a deep text, text 9.
Okay. There are 2 levels of love. That is to say, the first level is that of a person who loves his friend and fulfills his wishes in whatever way he can. However, his real intent is that he should be the one who loves, and that he be the one who does and fulfills his friend's wishes. This is still for himself. The second level is that he loves his friend totally and wants his friend's wishes to be fulfilled in any way, even if he will not be the one who does the favor and the one to fulfill his friend's wishes. Nevertheless, he wants his friend's wishes to be met very much. This is the level of true love.
This is very nuanced. The first one is, I want to be the one to do what that person wants. And the second one is, I want to make sure that it gets accomplished. How it gets accomplished? That's not even so important. The main thing that is it gets accomplished. It's a very subtle level. I heard a teacher once was talking, they had a class play. They were talking about maturity of different kids and, right when they give out the roles or the parts, a lot of kids fighting, I want this job, I want that job, So you have some kids that happily accept the role that they were given. You have some kids that don't, and they fight. And then the teacher said, one kid from the beginning just went up to the teacher and said, "Hey, whatever role you think I'm best for, just let me know." And they were amazed at the maturity of that child from such a young age. It's like, it makes no difference to me what it is. I just want to be best suited in the way that you think that I can be. And in a sense, that is our relationship with God, where we turn to God and we say, Hineni. Hineni is a beautiful word. Hineni appears in the Bible many times where God summons people. Abraham and when he asked, Moshe says it once.
The binding of Isaac.
Yes, binding of Isaac. So God says hello, and they say Hineni. Hineni means I'm here. I'm here now, ready. That would be the best translation of Hineni. I am here now, ready. And it's another way of saying, what adventure do you have in store for me today? I'm ready to come along. And when one has that perspective on mitzvot, it's what am I needed for today? We will all have those areas of life that we naturally do, and we should do those things, those mitzvot, that we enjoy, that we find meaningful, that we find spiritual. But if we are limited to only doing those, that often is an indication that it might be a little bit too much about us and not what I am needed for. And so the taking out of the garbage for the Kohanim, or in our lives doing those things that we feel as very dry, robotic, but we know that's meaningful to God, there is special richness in that. And the last point, because of time, I want to stop here, but the Rebbe also says there's something beautiful. There is the mitzvah, and then there's the preparation for or the cleanup of the mitzvah. Okay? And a lot of times, all right, the actual mitzvah, that's always thought of at a party. At a party, through an event or a holiday program, a Seder. All right, the most exciting thing is obviously the Seder itself. Some excitement also in the preparation for it, right? Because the preparation, you feel you are the ones making it possible. What is the least exciting? The cleanup. Because it was done, and at this point, you just want to go home. And to think that the cleanup is an absolute necessity, it is part of whatever it is, you really show commitment when you were involved in the cleanup. That it was never about the excitement per se, it was about getting it done. And as far as getting it done goes, there's no difference between the cleanup and the actual thing. As far as the utilitarian point of the mitzvah, there is a difference. So that is the take-home today of an old ritual that happened thousands of years ago, and its relevance on our lives today, both in relationships with other people, putting ourselves aside to the needs of the other person, the genuine needs, as well as when it comes to mitzvot, really understanding that a mitzvah in the Torah means God says this is very meaningful for you to do it. It's good if we find it spiritual, but even if we don't, that connection is still done. And yes, Pam.
I just want to say one last thing. Is that story with Rav Zusha, it has to do also with joy.
Yes.
In other words, they were crying, and when they turned around and started being joyful about maybe not doing mitzvah A, but doing mitzvah B, and they started dancing and singing, and that joy brought about
Absolutely.
Divine intervention or divine providence. And in a way, this is how it should look to our lives. And when you look at a mitzvah and says, I don't feel like doing this.
Exactly.
It's so boring and it's so tough.
And the joy breaks open boundaries. And that is a very important idea. It says joy breaks boundaries. It says fences are broken down by joy. And the other last piece of this, so there are times where we want to get involved in a certain mitzvah, and there's a roadblock that comes in our way, and we end up doing something else, okay? And that something else is not as exciting and not what we really embarked upon this path in the first place for. But guess what? That something else is what we're needed for right now. Ever happened? Different examples. And it's, you know what? If it was never about me in the first place, all right. Apparently this is not what I'm needed for. This is what I'm needed for. That's great. If, however, it was about I need to get this done, then as soon as you can't get that done, you're very, very upset. So the take-home here is that humility of embracing what am I needed for. That's not what your country can do for you, right?
Well, no, you just solved a thing that I'd been pondering on for days, and I'm like, well, yes, then I should just go.
But I think this has many take-homes, and I think of it also as in the parents' realm. Yes, Hal?
Another take-home that Ann knows. How do you say the second letter in mitzvah?
Mitzvah. Tzaddik.
Tzaddik. So you have Mem, Tzaddik, Yud, Hey. See, Ann knows this.
Got that part down.
And there's a cipher where you take the first letter of the alphabet and make the last one the first one. So the Mem, Tzaddik would be Yud, Hey, the first two letters of God. You have no idea why you're doing the mitzvah. You don't know the connection, except it's a connection to God. Knowing the reason is unimportant. And then the last two letters, Vav Hey, the second two letters of the name of God, is you do understand why you're doing this mitzvah, and it is also the connection to God. So the understanding is not the key.
And we have to marry both of these ideas together ultimately, and there's some that are better in the obedience, there's some that are better in the spirituality of it. We'll always lean more one way, and the idea is to try to have both at the same time, but again, not limit ourselves to what we find inspiring and meaningful, always. All right, we'll hold it there.
You're tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisroel Cotlar, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Parent Dome with Ryan Miller, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.